Someone can choose to live in survival mode and not get to the next level and not even realizing that they're staying in survival mode, because to them, this was just a change. Something happened. Now they've changed their life. This is where they're going to stay. No, you react and you change, but then you grow post that. After you accept, you survive, and then you accept that you've gotten out of your survival stage, and then you plan a new plan.
Welcome back, everyone, to the InvestHER Podcast. I'm Liz Faircloth.
And I am your co-host, Andressa Gadelli.
Going through a divorce or any traumatic experience has to be life's most challenging situations, especially when it includes our business.
Today, we are joined by Jenny Yip. She runs a hospitality design business that transforms Airbnbs and hotels around the world. We're going to dive into the divorce process, from going to delaying the decision, accepting the decision, surviving mode, and thriving mode. Take a sit and let's get started. Rebuilding. This episode, it's all about thriving and rebuilding after a challenge, a divorce. And I will be sharing a little bit of my story, but that's not about me today. Jenny, when you went through your transition from an investor to business owner, you also were faced with a challenge of going through a divorce. What would you tell those women that are in it right now and they're not seeing the end of that tunnel?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is the end of the tunnel outlook. When you are in a divorce, divorce is ugly. Period. Like all the people that I know who have gone through a divorce wouldn't wish it on their worst enemy. It's something that it hits the core of who you are. And it hits your failure point. No matter how you're coming out of it, you feel like you have failed at life. And failing at life is big, and it's huge, and it's a burden that you carry. And I think women in general carry that different because of how we are structured and the type of things that we give into a relationship. And then statistically, the math shows that women come out of divorce socioeconomically harder than men do. So we carry this providing of our future burden differently than men do coming out of divorce. And so you combine that with failure, and it's the biggest thing to get past that, honestly, is the mental. And I found that when I came out of it, my divorce was very ugly. It involved breaking of investments, it involved stealing from the business, it involved a whole lot of very complicated things. So when I came out of it, it took a long process. But I think the biggest key to that process, honestly, was the everyday. You start out with an everyday. Like for me, honestly, the biggest part of my everyday was telling myself to get up and just make it through the day so that I can go to bed. And that practice, that daily practice of telling myself what to do, kind of led to the different steps as life continues to go on. You substitute what you need to do that day. So like you're telling yourself new things. So over time it was, okay, get up and then do A, B, C, and D. Or even it was just A, it was go to the gym for me. That was my next step. Wake up, I will fit in gym time because I need to do something for myself. And then the next thing I added was, before I grew my business, my business grew from a hobby, honestly, was, okay, accept this. Like a friend of a friend had an Airbnb that they needed help with to set up. And I was like, I don't know if I can tackle this right now. It's probably out of my scope, and I'm probably not mentally in the game to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways, because how I feel right now is not how I'm going to feel 1 year, 2 year, 5 years out from now. So accepting the opportunities and understanding that what you feel in the moment is not how you're going to feel, and don't letting things pass you by at the time. They become foundational steps for you rebuilding your life without you realizing that they are foundational steps for you rebuilding your life.
100%. You're bringing a couple of memories to me. It's like I had to have my own back. One thing that I did, I think you know this. I don't know if Liz, if you do this or not, but I changed my password to I will survive.
Yeah, you told me that. I was like, I got
And
goosebumps when you told me that.
and that was a reassurance for myself that I will survive and I will thrive.
Yep.
Right? Because I think that a lot of women are staying in unhealthy relationships because they have a business with the partner and that they don't see the untangling it. Question for you. Did you guys have a quote unquote a try or a plan to, okay, we're going to separate, but we're going to continue doing business together? Or that was not an option out of the bat?
For mine, it was not, because I came home one day and he was just gone, like he had disappeared. And by the time I had found out what had really happened, he had moved in with another woman 2 streets down. And then by the time a couple of months of realizing all the scope, he had been living a different life and had been stealing money from our flipping business. And we had investors. He left me with nothing. And I had to face the investors. I had to finish the houses with, like, he took it all. So for me, I had no options of trying to, I just lost it.
And what did you put in place, Jenny, when you're the untangling part, right? Strategically, the attorney, the accountant, because the tricky part is that they're theirs too, right? So how did you start the untangling on the business side of investment?
Yeah. So for me, oh gosh, one was facing reality. Because I think you have that choice when you're faced with something to either dig in and accept this is the reality and go into problem solving mode, or you can try to ignore it in hopes that you're going to fix something on the personal side. They're separate and apart. You may still be able to fix things, but still have to address the business side of stuff. And whether one does or doesn't work out, your problem solving, you're a woman's best bet to success post any traumatic event, whether it's divorce, whether it's loss, whether it's any life-changing event, is their ability to problem solve despite how they feel. And if they can go into problem solving mode and they can take even moments, you don't have to detach yourself all the time, but you do have to take moments where you just set aside how you're feeling in that moment and start to list out these major things that need to be addressed. Because if you push those back, they have exponential negative effects, especially when it's coming out of something that's traumatic.
Yeah. I want to go back to, though, the accepting part, because, I have not gone through a divorce. So I cannot put my feet can't go into either of your shoes or the one listening, but I'm just relating it to my own experiences, right? That's where our mind goes often. And I'm thinking about the toughest things that have happened in my life that I had to come back from. So then I think about, oh, that's true. The accepting is the critical first step, but it's not this like dormant accepting. It's not like I accept it. It's not, it can't be that simple, and it isn't that simple. So what did that look like for you? Because I think we cursory go over that to problem solving, and women are amazing at that, right? They get shit done.
So much.
Excuse my French.
Yeah, no, they do. They do.
But if they don't accept it in the way that's going to really create, and I'm curious to get your thoughts around, what did that look like? What was that process like? And if you can give us more detail about it.
For sure. I had very pivotal, I think you're going to have different moments of accepting. And that you're never going to have this one aha moment. It's going to be very specific keys, like as you phase out your growth post whatever trauma you're coming from. And the first one is accepting that this happened and this is the situation you're in. And if you can't accept that and you kind of dance around this in the hopes that it's going to not be the situation, then that's the biggest, I think that's the biggest delay. The longer you delay that, because you can still have a good outcome no matter whether you accept it or not. It's just your ability to understand where you are, because what that does is it changes your mindset at that moment and every decision you make from after that. So for me, I had to accept husband was gone. I had to accept money was gone. I had to accept business was gone. I had to accept that my life waking up and 2 weeks out from when I came home 2 weeks before was completely and utterly different. And then I had also to accept the ways that I trusted or contributed to living a life that didn't see the red flags. And I think that level of acceptance didn't come in the beginning. It comes after you start to process certain things. So you've got the acceptance of your situation, then you get your problem solving and you put in your plan A. And usually your plan A is not thriving plan, it's surviving plan. You are allowed to be in survival mode. That's okay. The issue to get to that is getting out of survival mode. Because someone can choose to live in survival mode and not get to the next level and not even realizing that they're staying in survival mode, because to them, this was just a change. Something happened. Now they've changed their life. This is where they're going to stay. No, you react and you change, but then you grow post that. After you accept, you survive, and then you accept that you've gotten out of your survival stage, and then you plan a new plan. So for me, my next level of acceptance was, okay, now that I've dealt with what I had to, all the immediate things in front of me, what do I do now? Like, this is life. I put out the fires. So what's next? And that's when opportunities started coming and friends started coming and people with small projects started coming. And that was my next phase of like, okay, what's next? And I didn't know that this would be projected out. You don't have to have a 10-year timeline when you're trying to fix this out, because sometimes your 1 year is going to look so different. Even your 6 months when you're coming out of a trauma is going to look vastly different. You just have to be aware enough to say, I can take this in this moment because this is helping me where I am now. And it's giving me a buffer zone to start thinking about what my 1 year is going to look like. And then the thing is, like, once you come out of those traumatic situations and once your mindset shifts to be open, well, that's what I found with a lot of women post-divorce, is they all of a sudden become open to a lot of things that they weren't open to in their marriage. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. They just didn't know these things existed because they were living a certain type of life to begin with one way. And now when you become open, so your post-survival is just being open. Once you're open, you'd be surprised kind of what comes your way. And being able to say, you know what, I want to take a chance on that, can turn into something completely magical, honestly. Like, I hate to use the word like floofy and magical, but like it really can.
Absolutely. I want to break down for the ladies that are listening, right? Because if you're listening to this episode, something is up. Something is up in your relationship and you're curious about it and more understanding of what it is. So there is this like delay, and I want to dissect that a little bit with you. There's this the delay on making a decision. Then there's this acceptance, and then there's survival mode and then thriving mode. The delay of making a decision, if you're listening to this episode, if you came to me at InvestHER and hold my hand, and in 2 seconds, you are saying to me that you do not know if you are on the right relationship, you've got to listen to yourself. You do. It's not going away. I remember very vividly for 2 years, that voice inside my head, on my gut. There was no way out. I knew it. And in 2 years, I gave all that I had to turn that around, but there was no turning around. And Jenny, I want to talk to you about that. I don't know if a lot of women are aware of the price of the delay, of how much energy is consuming them. And they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to do it on my own in the future. And I'm telling you, ladies, as Jenny was saying, the thriving phase, it is amazing the amount of energy that was consuming, that you're not even aware right now that it's consuming you and is robbing you from opportunities. So I wanted to mention that to you, Jenny, in terms of the energy that was consuming you during your transition.
Oh my gosh. And I'll be completely candid with your listeners. You know, I'm 4 years removed. Now I have a thriving design firm. Now we're the first interior design firm to ever franchise. So like, we went big and had this big win. But that part, honestly, was easier. The logistics of business and the analytics and the finance and the building, like, it's hard, but that in comparison to the mental, emotional, and energy loss when you're in that and when you're delaying that, getting past this like bubble of blackness, that's the hard part. The rest of the stuff, you surround yourself with other women who are super supportive. You surround yourself, like, women flock to each other, and they're like, the amount of people I've met that's like, no, we can partner together. I can provide you this. I know how to loan this. I've got this little bit and this little bit, but all of us together, we can go in this together. Those type of things are in your fixable situations where, again, women are problem solvers and we get really good at problem solving together. But you don't get to that until you get out of this mental and emotional bubble, and it's the energy suck. And for me, I stayed too long. Like, despite all the things that hit me smack in the face, despite what I was confronted with, and I'm hard on myself still for that. And I think women in general, we are hard on ourselves. So one, learn to forgive yourself, because you're going to look back and think about all the mistakes that you made to get you here, because you're going to feel like a failure and you're going to feel like your life is so different and so changed. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to recognize those, but forgive yourself, because unless you do, you're going to be holding this burden and you're going to be afraid to make more mistakes. And that's going to hold you back on the success side. And I found that I was so afraid at certain times to take certain leaps, because I was like, this is all I have left. Like, if I mess this up again, like, I don't have anything. So the ability to give, but you transition when you're like, okay, I've come out of this. I stayed too long because I was hoping, despite all this, I mean, at the end of the day, even when it's traumatic, and I know in divorce, like, I loved him. I built a life with this man. I married a life with this man. And then I had family obligations that I thought coming into this about what marriage was. And you don't give up on things because that's not our personality. And a lot of investors, especially women investors in general, we have a personality where we don't give up. So that is a hard wall smack when it comes to you personally, because it's not a giving up, it's realizing facts. So there's a difference between giving up on something and then realizing facts and pivoting. We just tend to, when it comes to our own personal life, assume it's a giving up, and instead of realizing it's facts and having to pivot. And that's where I had to be like, my forgiveness of myself was things that I didn't know about a circumstance, about a completely second life that I had no privy to, because he was military. He was actually trained to hide things. He was specially trained. So like I had to take my guilt and my thinking that I had messed up so bad and realize that no, if this was an investment, then I would have been presented new facts and changed a direction. And I took too long to change a direction. And it cost me emotionally, it cost me more financially, and it cost me on the mental, what I had to do to compromise myself, to feel like I had value to the person who was already walking away from me, cost me more in the long run, emotionally and mentally, to fix than had I recognized it and I had just walked away sooner, honestly.
I want to ask both of you this question because the price of delay, as you're saying, Angessa, is a very powerful way to coin that term. There is a price of that delay, right? And so both of you, in the sense, see that time frame could have been cut down possibly by some amount, right? But how does someone in it cut down that time? How does someone living in it, in the throes of it, how do they cut that time down? It's I would imagine it's easier when you're through it versus in it. So what would you say to yourself, not even another woman, yourself, to cut that time down so the price of delay wasn't as strong? I'm curious to understand that. I think it'd be really cool to hear that from both of you. What do you think, Angessa?
I think I can speak about my own situation, right? And I encourage every woman to take in consideration everything that you have going on, right? In my case, my family is in Brazil. There's no support system around. Although I do have friends that are my core and I can drop in their house, no problem. But that's not the point. My family was not around here. I had a 2-year-old son, right? We had a very thriving, the highest of our business. I had responsibilities that I took upon myself to make sure my investors were taken care of, and the properties and the projects that were in construction got to the end line. So there was a lot of in loses there. And I put myself not at first, I put myself after all of those items. What I would have done differently is establishing, knowing what I know now, right? Knowing what I know now about myself is that my boundaries were not established. And when I say boundaries, like this is how we're going to do it, and this is what we're agreeing to it. And if we are not on the same page, we need to exit. That is it. There, I will not be complying to a unhealthy behavior for 2 years, because the damage in my nervous system that I will have to repair for the next 5 years are going to be higher. And I had to go through it and repair those damages because of myself, my own happiness. And I wish the person the best, but I ain't carrying this person with me for the rest of my life. I'm not carrying any guilt. I'm not carrying any resentment for myself, because I love myself more than anything else. My son always says, "Mommy, you come first." Exactly. I come first. My cup needs to be full. And I did not have that approach in the past. I was not first. I was behind every single item that I just listed. So I would shift that, because my health will propel a better life for myself, for my family, for all the investors that are looking. That will be my take, considering all the factors that I was facing at that time. For you, Jenny.
Yeah, I think you really touched on a big piece, and that's the boundary piece. And I think that one, it's a good lesson for all your listeners in general, boundaries, because we have to have boundaries with friends. We have to have boundaries with other investor partners. We have to have boundaries with business partners. It's just we tend to be really good, women in general, with boundaries that are external and not boundaries that are internal. And those internal boundaries are where your biggest compromises come from. So if I look back on how I could have lessened my time, yes, the boundary setting was absolutely one. But even in that, I think that as women, we tend to, again, because especially when the trauma is so personal, we tend to mix our emotions along with the future aspects. So both the internal and the external. So like the forward thinking stuff, and then you're in the moment stuff. And I think the way to do that is to understand that you can create an environment where you give yourself time to make decisions. Like time and trauma will pressure you to make decisions in the moment, but a lot of women need to think through before they feel comfortable, like to make such big decisions, because we're used to making your everyday running the household, lots of decisions like that. But these big life-changing decisions, because we know that our decisions are projecting out on those around us. It's not just a decision for us. So we are already assuming tertiary and secondary and tertiary effects of our decisions, which is why we're so hesitant, because we don't want to make the wrong one, because we know other people rely on us. It's not just about us. And just like you're saying, because our boundaries, we're willing to sacrifice ourselves to make sure that they stay steady. So if I look back on that, the way I would have done it is I would have crafted a time. You can craft a time. So especially if we're talking about divorce, you can create a space of separation in which it gives you the ability to detach and the space you need to make decisions. And that's not the same as divorce. That's not the same. That's not the equivalent of putting a nail in the coffin. That's not you making the first move to start a downward trend in a spiral. You wanting that space to make a decision isn't going to be the precipice to ruin everything. And if that's what you're being told, then you are way further along your failure line than you think you are. You making a decision to give yourself space to think and to craft and make a good decision, those closest to you and those who want to problem solve with you will recognize that that's needed, and they themselves will probably need it too. And if they're not recognizing and they're not on the same page about fixing a big problem, or at least taking the time to solve or think through options, then they will never be on the same page about big life decisions, no matter what. So like, if I look back on it, I should have created an environment where I could have made decisions away from the emotional aspect, because the emotions are always going to be there. But when you're in a situation, it's the pressure of the everyday that's removed. So the biggest thing I would say in any traumatic, any big life-changing moment is, if you want to delay your time of making, the wrong choice, the time of delay, then create an environment where you can make a decision. Because that's the biggest piece. And you can only do that if whether it's a physical separation, whether it's a time separation, it's going to be unique to the individual woman. But my biggest thing is, if I had separated a space for myself to process, because you can't process when you're still pulled in all the directions. And if I had allowed myself to process sooner, I would have reduced my delay time.
I want to share a resource here. Usually this is for a business, but I believe it can be applied to relationships.
I know you're going to say it's perfect for either.
It's called Necessary Endings. It's a book by Henry Cloud, and it gives you specifically questions that you can ask yourself of how you can make a confident decision about what it is that you should continue working on versus ending. And there are certain endings that are necessary for both parties. I want to get to the thriving part, Jenny, because I think that a lot of people frame the starting over as a negative. And I would encourage all of the women that are listening, it's a wide canvas, honey. You can paint it as you freaking wish, and you don't need to ask anybody if they like the color of it, right?
Woo-hoo!
So, yes. So for you, Jenny, how did that look like, painting and creating and welcoming new opportunities that were not even on the horizon for you?
Not even on the scope, not even on the scope. And it's just, so when we were married, we had a successful flipping business, and we had investors on, and, it was good. The houses would never stay on the market for more than 30 days. We were running multiple at a time. We were under contract with a TV production company. To me at the time, life was great. So I couldn't have imagined anything better or different. But I look back at that and what I thought I lost, and I realized that even in what I thought was successful, I didn't have a true partner in that. So that, for me, that growth of what I thought was good would have been capped at what I thought. And because of what I was spending all my time in on the personal side, that would have capped what now I've come to realize was so much of my own entrepreneurship journey, because now my whole investment is to myself. So that led to opportunities. If you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would have a firm that only does hospitality, and we would be traveling the world and people would be paying us to do it, and we'd be franchised, I would have looked at you like, you are high as a kite, because I couldn't have even fathomed that concept or that thought. And what I had wasn't bad. So it's not like it's a bad and a good. It's just different. And different can be so good in so many ways. I promise your listeners, if you can just tell yourself to get up in the morning and go to bed at night, that turns into 3 months. That turns into 6 months. Then you add on to that. Before you know it, it's a year. Before you know it, it's 2 years. I'm looking back on 4, almost 5 years out. You can't project the things that life manifests for you when you are brave enough to take a risk on yourself. Because we are brave enough to take a risk on a lot of things, but we doubt ourselves. And it takes a different type of bravery to risk yourself and take a bet on yourself. And trust me, you're looking at all these women who are super successful, who are coming out of these things, and you're like, I can't even compare. It's not a comparison tool, because you coming out of what you're coming out is going to look so different, but equally beautiful. So it's not a comparison tool. You can literally get there, and your life is going to be so vastly different and amazing and intuitive, and you'll have friends and people and circumstances and opportunities that just wouldn't have come based on an old life and an old thinking and an old viewpoint. Even if that old was good, it's just different forward. And if it's you investing and betting on yourself, it's another level of pure internal good endings that you get to live.
I want to highlight something that you said here that I think is so important. The relationship that you are in can be a cap in terms of your personal growth and your business. And I think that we underestimate that. We're in no means here saying, yeah, go divorce everybody.
No, not at all.
Liz, kick back. Let's go.
I'm like, right? To do for the day.
To do for the day. That's the approach here is like healthy. We encourage healthy relationships. Yep. True partnerships grow. Right? We're not saying that partnerships are rainbows, but both parties are willing to grow individually and invest into the relationship, into the business partnership. It's 100-100, isn't 50-50. And if you are putting 100, the other person is putting 30, or whatever that situation might be, it ain't a partnership. And that is capping your growth. And most important, you living your best life. And I stand for everybody to live their best lives. And that's the bottom line of this episode. If you are having that feeling, you have to have, as Jenny said, the courage. It will take something from you that you have not put it in the arena to play. You will. But we can guarantee you we're standing tall here and thriving, not just surviving. You gotta go through the survival mode, and there is a thriving, beautiful place for all of you listening. So take in consideration with a grain of salt what we are sharing here on this episode with you, and take time to think and don't delay.
Jenny, thank you so much for sharing, your story today, and also sharing your kind of way of being in all of this, very authentically, very real, very transparently. And I think that's something we embody at this community for all the things we're working on, especially going through such traumatic experience like you have and so many women have. So thank you. Where can everyone listening learn more about you?
Of course. Thank you for having me. I love women. I think we are a beautiful community, and I think our honesty with each other is part of the reason that we can grow so well together. You guys can find me on Instagram. It's at Jenny_Jenny E Designs. You can find me on Facebook. Just search Jenny Yee. So JENNYYI. I've got a website too where they can shoot me any emails and any questions going forward. But I love connecting with women, and I love connecting with women in this space. And I love helping women create businesses that are successful so that we can thrive. Thriving is possible.
Awesome. Jenny, thank you again for coming here and tackling it. A lot of women that are going through this, I'll thank you on their behalf in advance. So thanks so much.